Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, April 28th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 124 days. The game against Michigan in 215 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at GratefulGriddleOH.com. Yes, I am back. Had a little bit of an unexpected family situation, me gesturing vaguely. Everything worked out fine, just had a sort of emergency trip across the country. So thank you very much to Tony and Kevin and everyone else who helped fill in my absence, even if they didn't always get the dates exactly right. It's fine. It's fine. That's not what the show's really about. The show's really about talking about Ohio State football. And we're going to be doing that again today with our buddy Tony Gerdeman, safely out of the host chair, just sitting, relaxing, letting me carry the load as usual. That's okay, Tony. Always glad to have you back. We got to talk about the end of the transfer portal window, that window closing, because this is one of these, like the Sherlock Holmes, where it's the dog that doesn't bark. The news about Ohio State in the transfer portal in the spring was the players who didn't transfer. They had four guys who left. It was running back T.C. Caffey, wide receiver Reese Stocksdale, long snapper Morrow Evans, and punter Anthony Veneri. None of those guys were scholarship players last year. Ryan Day, I think, posted somewhere or was interviewed somewhere and basically said as soon as the clock hit midnight, he cracked a beer and was like, oh, thank goodness. This feels for a team coming, that has as many talented players as they had and who bravely was willing to put their spring game on television. That feels pretty remarkable to not lose a single scholarship guy to the transfer portal.
You make a great point, Tom. The way that Ohio State has brazenly made their roster available to the public at large to know, hey, we've got players here that you might like. It is interesting. It's the fact that I think, for one, maybe this is the biggest reason why nobody left, you didn't have to push anybody out because I don't even specifically know what their scholarship number is at. And we're talking to Ryan Day, scheduled to talk with Ryan Day on Tuesday. So we can start to ask and get some of these things finalized. Like, how many scholarships are you planning? What kind of roster do you what size roster? Because they went into spring with 105, and those aren't all scholarship players. But what does this look like? And I think the fact that nobody left, the main reason they didn't have to push anybody out. But still, all of those players that go through spring and see where they are in the pecking order, every year we talk about the guys who are the blueprint for leaving, where they've been passed by younger guys and things like that. It's like, well, the writing was on the wall with them. Makes sense. None of those guys left either. And it's not because Ohio State's paying them well to stay or whatever. It's because they want to be here and continue on. But yeah, it's very interesting to me that no scholarship players decided to leave in the spring portal because that's just not the norm. And I don't think it's the norm really anywhere. So it'll be interesting to talk with Ryan Day on Tuesday to find out why he thinks that is and what that means for this year.
And, you mentioned the 105 number, and that's something that it happened last week. And I don't know how much it was really talked about, but the court case, the House case, they're trying to work out a settlement there. And the judge, as they were sort of setting up, before the settlement, sort of said, yeah, so the proposal was you're going to go to 105 player limit on the roster. Before the settlement was sort of put together, the judge said, I think you guys should really think about phasing that in so you don't have an impact on a ton of players right now, because you had 85 scholarship guys, but a lot of teams are carrying 120, 130 guys on the roster, which all of a sudden multiply, say 15 guys per roster times 130 teams. Boy, that's a lot fewer, opportunities on those rosters immediately overnight with no real planning. So the judge said, hey, what if you phase that in? If you thought about that, and then they said, well, think about it. And then they didn't do it because the NCAA didn't want to do it. And then the judge got the proposed settlement and said, okay, let me put this another way. Phase it in or I'm going to deny the settlement. So it's probably going to be phased in, but they don't yet know exactly what those numbers are going to be, when those numbers are going to, is it going to go from 120 to 115 to 110 to 105? Is it going to be 115 to 105? We don't know yet. They're still sort of working that out. But that's the number, whatever that number is, that's the number you got to be at the start of the season. So that's the challenge right now. You're trying to put together your roster. You've got these guys in the portal. You could potentially still add guys. You're not going to lose anyone else, but you could potentially add guys. But you don't know what the number you're shooting at yet is. So, there's been a lot of things, Tony, where I've said, boy, if you really had to sum up the NCAA's handling of, the last 30 years or so, there have been so many great opportunities to say, boy, this is really emblematic of the NCAA's handling of this whole thing. But boy, Tony, when a judge tells you, hey, you should probably think about doing this, and you're like, nah, we good. Like, yeah, it's probably not. That's probably like, you want to revisit that decision.
Well, the reference that we've used on the show before, it's Flanders beatnik parents, where they Flanders as a young child was out of control, and they're like, "You got to help us. We've tried nothing, and we're all out of ideas." And that's the NCAA. We've decided to do nothing, and so yes, the judge is like, either grandfather all of these players in or phase it in. And I saw one administrator was like, "Well, now we have no choice. Good, now we can get this thing done. This is what it took. What are you going to do? Like, are they going to stand firm? Like, no, we're not going to phase this in, and everything else, the entire deal is going to break down. No." So the judge knows she's got this kind of one at this point. And the thing is, like, she doesn't want to negatively impact any of these players because it's not their fault that they've been, taken advantage of or however. Now, the thing is, a lot of those players have already been cut to get down to 105 by a lot of these programs. So, like, they've already been negatively impacted. But the other thing is, like, those guys were never going to play. So really, it's not like their opportunities have been taken from them. Like, your opportunity to get beaten up on scout team, I guess, has been taken from you. But nobody that was going to necessarily impact a game this season has been cut. But anyway, Tom, that's tomorrow's morning show. That's a different morning show. What do you want to talk about today?
Well, you mentioned the Ned Flanders parents thing. How did they solve that, Tony? They solved that with the University of Minnesota Spankological Protocol, as we all know. And the University of Minnesota, in terms of guys who Ohio State is bringing in, University of Minnesota lost an offensive lineman to Ohio State, Philip Daniels, during the winter portal. And then the Minnesota actually ended up with an offensive lineman that Ohio State was looking at, a Purdue transfer, during the spring window. But the Buckeyes have added 2 players already. Again, they could potentially add many more. We don't know exactly how many because we don't know exactly what the number is. But they've added 2 players so far in the spring window, both in places where I think Ohio State fans and Ohio State coaches had looked and said, might want to add some people. They're up 2 so far. Business probably not closed for the spring portal season. But we'll talk about the first guy. That is Bo Atkinson, University of North Carolina defensive end. He was one of the top players in the portal, a guy who feels like, sometimes you're bringing in guys for depth. Sometimes you're bringing in guys to potentially be immediate impact guys. Bo Atkinson feels much more like an immediate impact guy who could see significant snaps and make a real impact on this fall's team.
Yeah, I think I should just go back and look and see, did all of his numbers last year better all of the numbers from Ohio State's potential other 4 defensive ends this year? And I'd probably yes on that. But he's started, which is something that I don't think any of these guys. I think CJ Hicks started once, and that was at linebacker when Cody Simon was injured last season. But this is a guy that has a lot of experience and is productive with that experience. And 6'5", 6'6", 260 pounds, a big defensive end that can stop the run, can get after the passer, and is proven. And so they have 1 proven defensive end now on the roster. And they like, Logan George comes from Idaho State. We'll see what that becomes. He had a good spring. CJ Hicks moving from linebacker. We'll see what happens there. Everybody feels very good about Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry. Can they do it as starters? Can one of them do it as a starter? Because right now, I think if you were to venture a guess at this point, I'd say like the opening day starting defensive ends would probably be Bo Atkinson and Kenyatta Jackson. That's where I am right now. But if you got a good group of defensive ends, and we've seen it in the past, Larry Johnson will rotate you. And the thing is that maybe the Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau were so far ahead of Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry for most of their careers, there wasn't going to be an even rotation. Maybe it's more even this year because the talent is more equated than in the past.
And one other thing that could impact the rotation numbers and the snap numbers for those defensive ends is if you feel like, if you've got some bigger defensive ends like Atkinson, maybe if you're looking to slide him inside in passing situations. They've run that rushman package with 4 defensive ends on the field, with the middle of the defensive line still kind of up in the air, where they feel real good about their top 2 guys at, the top 1 guy at each position, and then behind that it's kind of a little bit more of a shrug emoji. Yeah, they'd like to add another defensive tackle or 2, but you can also sort of help to address those numbers, and taking Caden McDonald and taking Edric Houston off the field a little bit to give them some rest, is to run that rushman package more. And if you have 4 guys who you feel pretty good about at edge, with Atkinson and Jackson and Caden Curry and Logan George, and then, does Dom Kirks get in there? Does Josh Mickens get in there? One of those other guys, maybe even one of the true freshmen. You've got opportunities to sort of spell those inside guys situationally. If you get in a 3rd and long kind of thing, that can make a difference there as well. The other guy that they've brought in so far in the portal is Justin Terry, offensive tackle out of West Virginia. This is one that feels much more like a long-term play rather than this is someone you really need to be on the field this fall. Because coming out of spring, I think we both felt like the starting offensive line, your 5 starters are on the roster coming out of that spring game. And then Brian Day said it's really more about build those numbers up, because they've missed their numbers a couple times by a guy or 2 the last couple of years. Just sort of rebuild that offensive line room after they had a bunch of guys transfer.
Yeah. And for me, like you mentioned, the starting 5 is all set, and we can get into that in a sec, but are they want 6, 7, and 8. And I feel like the next guy in is maybe Ian Moore, then you've got Philip Daniels, but like they know who their next center is. That's probably Josh Padilla, but who is their next guard in? And frankly, it might be Austin Seerveld, which means you've got to have a tackle ready to go. And in terms of does Justin Terry factor in this year in that way? I don't think so. Local kid, Pickerington Central. He's going to be the 3rd Pickerington Central player on the team this year, joining the Stiles brothers. But this is kind of what the portal, to me, I think the future of the portal and the larger rosters is going to do, at least in the immediate, is bring some of the local players back home, and now also allow you to offer some of these guys. Like if they're going to have, say, 93 scholarship players on the roster, because I don't think once they get to 105, Ohio State is not committed to going to 105 scholarship players. But is this one of those guys that would have made it as a scholarship player with an expanded roster? Like some of these local prospects that maybe a late bloomer type of thing, which, I know West Virginia seemed to be a little bit, certainly didn't want to lose him. That was somebody that they were counting on down the road, but he didn't play last year. So again, a project this year, a guy that's just going to continue to work, but 6'6", around 330 pounds, a big kid with, possible future.
Yeah, and we'll see if he stays at 338 pounds or whatever he was listed at. CJ Donaldson, when he came over from West Virginia, they basically said, well, the good news is you don't have access to Tudor's Biscuit World anymore. So getting these extra 10 to 15 pounds off of you should be fine. We'll see, does Terry play at 338 or 335, or is he more like in that 320 range? As you said, last year was his freshman year and he didn't play. So you got 4 years of eligibility left. So you get plenty of time there to sort of develop, take your time. You don't ever want to rushing offensive linemen who are not Paris Johnson types out there. That generally doesn't work real well. So you have the luxury of being a little bit patient, because now you do kind of have that quality depth at the top of the offensive line. It just feels like you're already in a better situation than you've been in virtually any of the previous years, even though you had a couple first-round draft picks leave that offensive line room. So definitely an encouraging transfer portal season for the Buckeyes in the spring, and that they're probably not done. Probably do a show later in the week looking at some of the other opportunities, other options out there, because there are plenty of other names out there, and there are certainly some areas where the Buckeyes are looking to add some more folks. Be talking about that with you all at the Buckeye Huddle message board, the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. That is at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That is where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. We got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there as well, all to make you a smarter football fan, and all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.